Welcome to Paper Quest. I'm Jessie.
And I'm James.
And we're two friends teaming up in our ongoing quest through the Infinite Library.
Each episode, we get together to discuss our latest buddy read, swap stories on our recent solo reads, and talk about the upcoming books we look forward to reading next.
This is Paper Quest.
So this week, we read The Priory of the Orange Tree, which is a pretty massive book. So we didn't get too much side reading in. We did about one book each. I am doing Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Newell. You've read this one, correct? Turquoise blue cover.
No, is it a movie?
I don't believe it's a movie. So it's a trilogy. It's a very grounded fiction book, but it's also it's sci-fi as well, without a doubt. But it's much more grounded, realistic sci-fi. Basically, at a young age, this girl, during her birthday party, gets a bike, takes it out for a ride, and then while she's riding, for whatever reason, the ground starts to shake and it breaks, and she falls into the ground onto a gigantic metal hand that's been buried for who knows how long. And then she grows up and decides to, she gets the opportunity to study the hand and hopefully find more pieces to whatever this thing is that's been buried for potentially thousands of years before we could have possibly had the technology. So I'm about 100 pages in, maybe a little less, out of like 300 pages. Extremely small book, extremely short. It's done in the style of mostly interviews. It doesn't read like a regular book. Not too much to say about it right this second until I get more into it, because it's still very much a mystery. But that's where I am with that. How about you?
So right now I am listening to One of Us is Next by Karen M. McManus. And it's a sequel to a book called One of Us is Lying, which I bought on impulse at Target because it was on sale. And in One of Us is Lying, the first book, basically there is 5 or 6 kids who go to detention. They were all tricked there. It wasn't like a real... they did get caught with cell phones in class, but it wasn't their cell phones, so they were set up. And basically 5 go in, 4 come out, and they have to figure out, because now they're all facing murder charge, why and how this boy died.
What?
Yeah. And so they do figure out what happens in that book. And this is the second, where basically someone is trying to mimic that same situation, but it's with the next generation of kids. So all younger siblings and friends and things like that.
The five kids know who did it, of course, but the people don't. They went in and they don't know what happened to the other guy.
Correct. Well, so they know what happened. They and it's not a spoiler. They basically see him drink water, and then see him convulsing, and then don't have to put the pieces together to figure out what happened.
That actually intrigues me. That sounds really interesting.
It's really interesting, and the twist was good in the first one. So I'm about halfway in this one, and I'm listening to it from my library app, Libby, and it's good because it's from the different viewpoints, and it has different voices. One of them sounds like Mila Kunis, so I have to look up, does she do that? I know she's Meg in Family Guy, so maybe. But yeah, it's really interesting because there's also kind of I don't know what to call it, but there's this component in it where in the first one, the boy who died used social media to put out everyone else's secrets and gossip and who's sleeping with who and, who's cheating on tests and things like that. And in this one, the bad guy is basically sending to the whole school hey, this targeted person, truth or dare, if you take the truth, I'm putting out one of your secrets that'll ruin your life. And then if you take the dare, you're going to do something criminal or be told to go kiss someone and then break up their relationship or something like that. So we don't know who this person is yet.
This is an episode of Black Mirror.
So I've never seen Black Mirror.
And it isn't literally, but it sounds very, very Black Mirror-esque. Like, that's what I would expect to see in that show.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And it's like a palate cleanser because, as you said, I had a journey with our buddy read. And so this is, like, easy, interesting. I can just, like, listen to it while I'm doing stuff.
Well, we can jump right into that because there is a lot to talk about. We will not talk about everything because it is in the time frame that we typically have. It's just not possible. There's so much going on with this book. It's a straightforward fantasy. It's not some massive confusing thing, but it is a lot. So we'll jump into a summary. I've written one up that is a little bit longer than usual, but I'm trying to cover everything at the most basic possible level. So this is told from 4 different character perspectives. We have Eid, Roos, Loth, and Tane. We follow their world-spanning adventure to stop the Nameless One from returning, a great evil born in the time of legends, trapped for 1,000 years. This is a world divided, where the East train with and live among the water dragons, and the West refer to the dragons as worms and prefer them dead. Queen Sabran IX is meant to marry and bear a child, as the people believe her line is what keeps the Nameless One trapped. Eid is secretly sent to protect Queen Sabran in the West and works undercover as a servant. Loth, also under the Queen's rule, is mysteriously sent away without the Queen's knowledge via someone who wants him to disappear. Meanwhile, in the East, Tane is getting ready for a ceremony in which she hopes to be selected as a dragon rider after years of training. She and Roos unexpectedly cross paths, continuously fighting over a recent mishap that changes the shape of their entire futures. As we jump around the 4 points of view, the main characters will eventually cross paths and attempt to work together for the common cause, but it will require 3 very specific items that were lost to time: a legendary sword and the waxing and waning jewels. 3 keys that can slay the Dark One forever. Can a world divided look past each other's clashing religions and ideals to stop the legendary threat? So, initial thoughts on my end. I was all into this book. It was a world-spanning, like I said in the summary, it's a very world-spanning fantasy epic. One thing right off the bat that I really liked about the book is its lack of magic. This is a magical world, but they don't use magic constantly, and magic is actually so scarce that only a select few people that can do it. The Priory of the Orange Tree is a literal priory where there is an orange tree whose fruit bears magic if you eat it. There are other trees that have existed or still do exist that can give you magic. It sounds like there's very few left. Most people don't even believe magic is possible, and they basically frown upon it. It doesn't rely on a lot of magic. It's not just like, I can do magic for the sake of magic and it solves all of our problems, basically. They rely on more grounded, quote-unquote, grounded means to do the things they're trying to do. What are your first initial thoughts?
So I went through a journey. I've been reading this for over a month. And by all counts, I should have adored this book. Like,
I feel the same. I'm surprised.
There are lots of components that I was, like, really interested in. I shed a few tears. But for whatever reason, I think just kind of maybe the flow of the book, I did not want to read it. And I haven't read other books because I was trying to get through it. So I literally finished it this morning, 30 minutes before you showed up.
So when you say the flow, first of all, we should say the book is about 800 pages in all.
Yeah.
And I would say on average, with a few exceptions, almost every chapter flips to one of the 4 main characters.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because of the back and forth in the characters, or is it something else?
I think it's because I tend to use reading as a mental escape.
Mm-hmm.
And so the books that I choose are often written in a way that things are happening more quickly. There's no filler. Like, everything is, every page there's something.
Mm-hmm.
And here there was, many pages where there was, like, a tidbit that I would then need later. But, like, just stuff wasn't really happening. I mean, stuff was happening. I don't know how to explain it, but like,
Was it too much conversation, not enough action, or?
yeah, I think so. I think there was, and also there were times because, the title of the chapter would just be like East, and that could mean that it was Roos or, how are you saying her name?
They have Roos or Tane.
Tane.
Yeah.
I think in my head I was saying Tane, like different.
Close. I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. But so, Dr. Roos or the Dragon Rider, and sometimes I didn't know right away which one it was. Sometimes I didn't know if the point of view was one or the other right away, or it would be focused on one of the side characters, like the Queen, or Loth had a friend that was with him at one point, and it would kind of focus on that point of view, or a pirate's point of view that wasn't really central to the story. And so, I don't know, it just wasn't fast enough.
In the first 100 pages or so, it was, like you said, the chapter, east, west, whatever. Every time it would change chapters, I would have to go to the map in the beginning of the book, which is divided into 2 separate pictures depending on the continents. And I would say, okay, these are the 2 main places in the east, so it's going to follow one of these 2 characters. So it was a matter of learning the places it could be and the characters it could be, and once you caught on to that, then it was a better flow. But it was definitely like a learning experience. So even though there's 4 main characters, there's definitely a large focus on Eid and Sabran. They definitely take up a large chunk of this book. There's definitely a lot of conversation chapters, a lot of politics with them. I am someone who takes conversation over action in books. When I get to the action, I kind of just want to know the end result. Not that I don't enjoy reading the action, but after you've read so many books, you kind of get what's going to happen, and there's only so many ways you can describe it that's going to excite me. So when they get into the conversations and like the meat of the story and what they're going to do and the planning, that's what I enjoy, because that's all going to be new information for me. A sword fight, whatever, like I get it. I know what's going to happen. I know what it's going to look like. Just tell me how it ends. So I'm really in it for the conversations. I found them very interesting, and I loved how Eve doesn't have any evil intentions. Her job is to protect the Queen, even though it's in secret. But just watching her, because the Queen's kind of a bee, So I mean, we get to know her later on, and she's very nice, and she's got lots of problems on her shoulders. But she still acts like a queen, which is kind of, So watching her slide into the Queen's ranks and sort of build up to like her, I mean, they get into a relationship eventually, but getting up to that personal, private, like being in her sleep chambers and being a good source of information and helping her with, advice to run the kingdom, basically. How did you feel about that pairing?
I really liked it, and I think, as you were speaking, I think a good way to describe it, for me, this book was like putting together pizza and ice cream and coffee all into a cheeseburger and eating it. I loved all the individual components. I like Eid and the Queen. I like Tanae and her dragon. I cried over her dragon. I like Loth and his different interactions with pirates and all of these things, but put together, it didn't fit for me, or it just didn't, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it, but it didn't work for me.
You just liked everyone's individual stories.
Yeah.
You just didn't care for them to meet up, basically.
Well, and I had the thought too of if this was not 800 pages and it was 2 400-page books, or even
each book was a different storyline or point of view.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think I would have blown through it.
Okay.
So I don't know how to explain my relationship with this book, but it was hard.
No, it's funny because one of the reasons why I did blow through it is because something new was always going on or changing, or the next storyline was coming. Like, I didn't feel that there was filler. It started pretty normal, pretty fantasy, And then we started jumping around into all sorts of things. Like at one point, it was like a treasure hunt,
Mm-hmm.
for the sword and the jewels. And I feel like the what was going on was always changing.
Yes, I agree. And I liked all the individual components.
No, that's good. I mean, what's funny is it it almost all could have stayed individual because the characters barely cross paths, and when they do, it's not for long. And then when you get to the finale itself, where the nameless one comes out of the water and he's freed from his 1,000-year prison, the actual finale of the book is short. Like, it happens and it's done. And I'm like, that's kind of great. Like, they didn't drag this out. They came in with a plan. This is what we have to do. These are the things we need. And this is how it goes down. And of course, with some issue, because it can't be a perfect, execution, they do it. They stop him and it's done. And you're just like, yeah, they didn't drag that out for 200 pages.
Yeah, no, and I appreciated that, and I actually, maybe because I just read it, but I enjoyed that section a lot, and that portion felt faster to me. It was like moving through it, like, oh yeah, they're gonna do it. They're gonna, this is what everything's led up to. Um, so yeah, I just had it. It was just a very interesting journey for me.
Let's talk briefly about each storyline. So let's start with Roos, because he's introduced pretty early on as well. I feel like his whole adult life is a tragedy.
Yeah.
I mean, we learned that he had a secret boyfriend at one point. He gets
Exiled.
exiled. I was gonna say executed. He does not get executed.
No.
He gets exiled to this nothing island. He loses a hand. He gets basically enslaved by a pirate queen. I mean, his book or his journey in this book was a mess. Like not in a bad way. Just like it sucked for him. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was a journey.
Yes, and I didn't understand at first why he was coming around in the book. I didn't realize initially that he was a major component because his story came about because of Tanae's story, and that's how we're introduced to him. So I thought she was the focal point, which she is in her own storyline, but I didn't realize right away that he was as well. And because he was, when we meet him, like you said, he's exiled. He's just trying to live out his days, and he's an alchemist, and he's trying to find like the elixir of life, basically, to give to the queen to get himself out of exile.
But he kind of lies about it, and that's why the queen exiles him.
Yes, because she was young and scared, and she basically, told him her greatest fears, and he used it against her to manipulate the situation. And once she realized it, she was like, how dare you? I am, the only thing keeping the nameless one where he is, and you're out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Roos, if it wasn't for Tane's storyline, as far as I can remember, Roos wouldn't even be a part of this book.
Right.
So Tane, while not my favorite character of the four, her storyline is actually one of the most fascinating because one minute selfish decision sets off this chain reaction. So there's this, and all I could think about was COVID the whole time, but there is this, what do they call it? Plague.
Yep.
Going around.
The red sickness.
The red sickness. And they're like, well, if one person gets it, we got to get rid of them, exile them, kill them, whatever, because we can't have them passing it along. Well, one night she sees this stranger who might have the red sickness. This is the opening chapter of the book. And she knows her ceremony is the next day. And if somebody discovers that this stranger in a strange land is coming with a potential sickness, the town might shut down. They might cancel the ceremony and everything else. So she goes to a friend who takes this stranger and hides him out in Roos's house.
Yes.
Roos is basically, I believe he was blackmailed to kind of just sort of hold him for the time being so that she can go to her ceremony, become a potential dragon rider, and start her official training. And that sets off the whole chain reaction. That sets off people finding out about Roos, him getting sent to
the capital,
the
basically.
capital. Yeah, I was trying to say the kingdom or whatever. He gets sent to the capital. It starts off the whole thing. That's how he tries to get away. That's how he tries to blackmail Tani back by trying to do stuff with her dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Proceeds to get kidnapped by Pirate Queen. It's all Tani's fault for one selfish decision.
Yeah, but it's interesting because you were saying it's selfish. I think it's selfless when I read it because she let the man live when she should have killed him.
Yeah,
which is really interesting.
That gets into some moral conversation, I think, because technically, yes, what would happen if she reported this man she doesn't know? Do they go and kill him? Or do they send him away? Or stick him in a prison somewhere? Or does she let it be and let this man go free? Or is her hiding him the right thing to do because at least he would be alive? She wouldn't have to kill him. The capital wouldn't have to kill him. It's hard to say what would have happened if she didn't do that. But there was probably no right answer in that scenario, which starts off her entire storyline.
Right. And she didn't know where her friend was going to take the man that she found.
Yeah, she passed him off.
She just said, hey, Sousa, you've been my friend for my whole life. Help me.
Mm-hmm.
And her friend was like, yep, I got you. And then everything else kind of happened. And I think there was a lot of that. There was little pieces that you would learn in one part of the book that, again, were like inconsequential and then would come back. Or like
hard,
later,
yeah,
that I would
hard.
Like, fit together. So I did appreciate that, and I did think that was a really interesting part of how it was written.
Next, I would say let's do Eid and Sabran's storylines are so intertwined.
Yes.
Let's do Sabran first because Eid I want to talk about more specifically. Sabran, speaking of devastation, also goes through some crap in this book.
Yeah, so she becomes queen at age 14 when her mother is brutally murdered in front of her. And supposedly by an opposing kingdom. And she then lives her life in charge, but basically in this, gilded prison. She doesn't leave her palace. She doesn't interact with her people. She stops dancing, which was one of her greatest pleasures. Mm. And her whole job as queen is to marry and have the next daughter in the line because they only birth daughters. And she doesn't want to get married because she's terrified she'll die. She's had dreams her whole life that she will get pregnant, go to give birth, and then die in the childbed.
She has vivid dreams of places she's never been but actually exist, which is an interesting thing until we learn why later on.
So she does eventually get married because all this pressure is on her. They're like, you've been able to have kids for a minute. Like, hurry up, choose someone. Choose the old guy, he'll die quick, whatever. But she chooses a young man, and they do have a loving relationship over time.
Yeah, it felt pretty real to me, even though she was basically, queer. So it felt like maybe...
It was very guarded.
Yeah.
She as a human was very guarded, and she didn't know who to trust. Many people had died around her whole life. Her father had died, her mother had died. Her best friend, Loth, was actually sent away, and we'll talk about him, but he was sent away because they were too good of friends and he would ruin the marriage prospects. They hadn't done anything. They were just best friends from childhood. And then she does get pregnant, and her husband, who's brought joy back into her life, convinces her to take a walk around her and see her people for the first time in, I think it's like 7 years or something, more than that. And they are attacked, and he dies. And she just, I forget what they call it, but they basically had a name for depression. It was like something head.
Oh, that rings a bell, but I can't remember what it's called for the life of me. Yeah, so this book has a lot of legends and myth.
Yeah.
One of them being that her line is what keeps the nameless one at bay in prison, which we all know is ridiculous. Like, why would just giving birth to a child every however many generations. What is that doing? Nothing.
Well, so they think that she is a descendant of, I don't know how to say her name, Cleonland, the original queen, and that they're basically like God chosen,
Yeah.
in a sense. It's a religious component to it, and yeah, so everyone just thinks that, like, and they've only ever had one daughter each, and then the queen dies for whatever reason.
So I would imagine this continent or this people would always be on edge. You can't have one daughter and hope that person never dies. That's really scary if you're depending on the 1,000-year-long prison to stay intact. But a lot of this is built on myth and legend, and a lot of people they all believe in it, and they're all very religious, and they, like you said, they've not seen their queen in forever because she's sad, lonely, and just working her job. And when Albrecht, I'm so bad at saying it, I think it's Albrecht, the husband.
Yeah.
He wants to show her off in the best possible way. And people are like, do you know how many people will be out for her blood? So.
Well, and leading up to all this, he does meet with Ede and talk to her, and she says, don't do it.
Yep.
Because people have been coming after the queen every few weeks or whatever, and no one knew, but Ede had been killing them. She had set up wards so that she knew that people were entering, and she would kill them sometimes in the bedroom of the queen.
Which is an important note, because these so-called assassins, for whatever reason, weren't good at their job.
Yeah.
And the whole reason Albrecht dies is because once they go on their tour, the queen finally shows her face in public, and there's crowds upon crowds, and everyone's so happy to see her, and renews their hope. We have Trudy, who is Roos's secret boyfriend's granddaughter. She's kind of been against the queen and wants to prove... What was it?
No, it's not that she's necessarily against the queen, but she has gone through the ancient texts, and she is basically the first one, little did we know, to determine that the Nameless One's about to return. So she's like, we need to get an alliance with the East and those dragons, because those are the nice dragons, in order to save the queen. So it's well-intentioned, but she tries to pull it off in a horrible...
Because this is the side of the world that is against dragons.
Yes.
So Trudy's brilliant, quote-unquote, plan is to square the queen into submission, basically. But that leads to an accidental death of her husband, which then leads into depression. A little bit of time goes by. She's already pregnant at this point, but they haven't announced it yet. No, I think they did announce it, but what happens is then the dragons attack and she loses the kid, and she doesn't announce that she lost it.
Right. So before the tour, she had not announced that she was pregnant.
Okay.
And then they go out. And actually, right before she dies, she tells her husband, I'm pregnant. Like, live for me type of thing.
Right.
And then, actually, time goes by. They know she's pregnant. She's kind of cloistered away in sadness and fear. And the white worm comes. And this is the bad dragon, which we actually find out is an ancient evil witch. Mm-hmm. And the witch purposefully, hits her in the stomach and kills the baby. And so
in dragon form, so we don't yet know that she's the witch.
That all comes to pass toward the end. But she loses the baby and is, again, just in despair. And she's lost everyone she's ever cared about. And she was going to name her daughter after, she was going to name her Gloriana, and the idea was that, she would probably die in childbirth, but that Gloriana would, save the kingdom type of thing.
Yeah, her line always uses names from the past daughters of the line, just to keep that
the tradition.
Just to keep that tradition alive. Because she had a completely unique name that would be the first name in that line, but they all wanted to make sure that the people saw a certain name that would bring hope and stuff into their life.
Yeah, so Sabran was Sabran the Ninth, the 36th queen of her line.
And then, not relatively soon after, she will lose Eid to the rest of the story.
So to jump in, I was surprised by their love when it initially happened. So Eid is kind of a grounding presence for the queen.
Yes.
And so the way that it actually happens is Eid is tending to the queen, that's her job, and the queen is being all pouty and grumpy, and Eid is basically like, get up and eat or something. Like I'm not going to bring this to you. You need to walk over here and you need to eat it yourself. Like, I'm not going to spoon feed you. Get up. It's been long enough. And the queen's like, I'll have you killed. I'll have you exiled. Like, stop talking to me like that. I am the queen. And Eve just won't let up. And she's like, no, come be an adult. Like, eat your food, get dressed, comb your hair, go be queen.
The queen totally secretly likes it because nobody treats her that way. Like,
yeah, she treats her like a real human. And not like a China doll, in a sense. And not like she can get something from her. Mm-hmm. Because that's what everyone else wants, something from her. And so she treats her like a real human, and they're bickering, and then in what felt sudden to me, they're kissing.
I can see in hindsight where they were building that up, and actually, had I known what the book was about, because I guess people knew in advance this was a very queer and female-centric driven book, I had no idea until I got to these parts of the book. So it was surprising, but I can see how they built it up in hindsight. And it all worked for me. I had nothing against the way anything was done in this book. It was all very well done.
No, once it happened, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the second it happened, I was like, hold on. Like, did I miss something? She was just giving her crap, and now they're kissing, and oh, okay, they're sleeping together.
Yeah.
Like, which was all fine. It made sense, but I just had to have this moment of like, oh.
And as a complete unimportant side note, I wrote this down. I wanted to talk about it because to me, this is the funniest thing in the book. Going back to the beginning of everything, we kind of see Queen Sabran's a day in the life. And when she has a meal, the servants, the staff, fully cook 18 entire meals. She gets to pick the one that she wants to eat. I don't know what happens to the rest, but...
So, also, though, it's the same one. She picks the same thing every day.
Uh-huh.
And so basically they're like, here's a buffet. And she's like, I'll take the oatmeal. And that's actually how we start seeing the two of them interact. Mm-hmm. And Eid is... someone is sick that day, and Eid is her taster. And so she takes the bite of the oatmeal first, or whatever it was. And then the queen can eat. And then the queen starts kind of like talking to her, asking these questions. Again, very cold, very distant, very guarded. And slowly we kind of see that crack. And
it hurt my stomach to read that. I was like, please, I hope somebody else is finishing these meals. Or how many chefs are there? Are they doing this for every single meal? Like,
I feel like someone else is probably eating it.
I hope so.
But,
and the way they word things. So they're not like, we're going to have breakfast. They're breaking their fast. Yes. Like, they break it up into the actual meanings of the words.
Yes.
There was a lot of weird wording. Like, I'm not 29 years old. I'm 20 and 9. Or 9 and 20. Like, there's, like, what's the other word? They use, like, the word connection with an X, I think, or something.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of funny, just little grammar things in here.
Yeah.
That I love.
So, do you want to jump over to Loth or Tanae?
Let's jump into Loth.
Okay.
I would say I don't dislike any of the 4 storylines, but if I had to pick a least favorite, it's probably Loth's. And he doesn't have a ton of screen time, if you will, anyway, I feel like. I could be wrong. But he's just on this journey to get home to begin with.
Yeah, so like we mentioned, he was exiled, but he was exiled not by the queen. He was exiled by one of her loyal servants. He's called the Nighthawk, and from what I gather, I don't remember his formal title, but he's basically the like head of security. And so he decides that Loth and his friend Kit, they're both little lords. One of the pirates calls them lordlings, which I thought
almost
was
forgot
so
about
cute.
Kit. Now I'm sad.
Yeah. So he exiles them to a place where basically like 150% they're gonna die. And the previous ambassador who was there was the queen's father, and he hasn't been heard from. So the assumption is that he's dead. And so they're like, go find out what happened to, the king consort or whatever he was called. And
the continent he sent to, this is basically like the desert part of the world.
mm-hmm.
This is the same continent where Ede's Priory of the Orange Tree is.
Yes. And so he shows up and he is disgusted by the people that he's going to live with because they love what he calls worms, but they're dragons. There's a differentiation between water dragons and fire dragons, and the fire dragons are the bad ones, the water dragons are the good ones, and this empire does worship the water dragons and rides them and like worships them basically. And so he thinks that they're all bad and does not want to be there, and basically finds out that...
Well, this continent doesn't. They're against the dragons because they try to kill them, right? Or is that just the Priory? It's the...
Oh, you're right.
The east where Tane lives. They're the ones, because they have the water dragon riders.
But he also didn't like... Oh, because they... Sorry. Let's go back. Undo that. So the place that he goes, they used to be part of the alliance with Queen Sabran, and they fell to the Nameless One. They switched teams basically.
Yeah, they now worship the bad guys.
Yes, and so he shows up, and yes, he's very disgusted by them, and he thinks that they're horrible people. Not only because they turn their back on his best friend, but also because that King Seguro.
At some point, there's so many names, I couldn't even write them all down in my notes right here.
Yeah, so that king is he believes is the reason that Sabran's mother was killed, because she said she wouldn't marry him. And now the king consort was there and is now dead or gone, missing. And so he shows up with a chip on his shoulder. He's rude. He's a little haughty. He and his friend Kit are brought there by privateers, quote unquote, but they're really pirates.
But they're good. Like, we like them. They're good.
Yeah, they're good pirates. They meet a woman that calls them lordlings, like little lords, which I think is very cute. And he actually comes to find out that they did not willingly submit to the Nameless One, but that the Nameless Ones, I don't even know what to call them, henchmen, basically are forcing them into submission by killing their animals and crops and people, and that the king there is what they call a flesh king, so he actually has been infected by the red sickness, and the dragon, one of the bad dragons, can like see and hear through him.
Yeah, is this one, because the Nameless One, who himself is a dragon form, what did they call the two main dragons? Like his left shoulder and right shoulder, or left hand and right hand, something like that.
Wing, I think.
Wing, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he can the Friedel, I think, one of the bad dragons, can actually has taken over this king, and the king's daughter has figured that out, and she has, she's basically bound her father and drugged him so that he can't do any more harm.
Yeah, she's putting on a face, pretending like she cares about the Nameless One.
Yeah, she wears a big dragon helmet, headdress. I don't even know how to explain it. And is cold and mean and just all about the Nameless One. And then she actually gets a message to Loth and is like, yo, meet me in this weird, creepy, dust-ridden place and let me tell you what's really going on.
Yeah.
So I really liked her. I don't know that we find out what happened to her.
Yeah, what's funny is there are some lingering, I mean, in the grand scheme, not important, but there are some lingering threads of what happened with her and her, bound up father and stuff,
Yeah.
or king and stuff like that. And
So the king was killed, but it was unclear at the end what happened to her. But basically, she helps him and Kit escape, and she gives them this box and says, get this box to Ambassador whatever.
Someone, yeah.
in this place. And here's the secret exit. They actually get infected with red sickness because the dragons won't care if...
Okay, that's a question that I had for you, because before we knew about the secret exit out of the kingdom, or the castle, they were like, I have to sneak you out of here, I don't know how to do it. What we could do is give you, purposely, the red sickness, and then they'll have to let you go because they won't want you here, basically. And so they do that. He and Kit both volunteer to get the sickness. They touch like the father or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, okay, cool, that makes sense. Like that's a perfect explanation to kick him out of the kingdom. But then she's like, meet me here late at night through this secret tunnel. And all I could think of was like, wait, if there's a secret tunnel, why did they have to get the sickness for real? They could have just said they had it.
No, so it's she knew about the tunnel. She had already sent the king consort through that tunnel.
Yeah.
And he died on his way out. The reason that they got the sickness was because the bad dragons, can smell the sickness on them and won't follow them.
I think I totally missed that.
Yeah, they don't want to eat bad dinner.
I completely missed that. That makes sense, though.
Yeah. And so she gives them this box that no one can open. It's weird. And they start heading out. And I don't even know how, but worms come and Kit dies. And that was my first moment of
there was a cave-in, yeah.
Oh, I might... Not that I wanted Kit to die. Because he was very, happy and, always trying to look on the bright side.
He was the best friend, the positive, upbeat guy. Loth was like, you're not the exiled one. You can stay here. You can do this. You can do that. You don't have to keep following me. And he's like, dude, where you go, I go. Yeah. And you're like, that doesn't always end well.
He was, I can't think of his name. Sam. He's Sam from Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And he's just like, Frodo, I'm with you.
Yep.
And he's happy the whole time. He's like, oh, we're going to go out and we're going to go get red sickness. He's like, yeah. He's like, we're going to go out to the desert. Yeah, we're probably going to die of hydration. Let's go.
Yeah. Yep. That's about right.
And then he does die, and it's very sad. But somehow, trials and tribulations, Loth gets to where he needs to be. He passes the box off to the ambassador, who happens to be the person that helped Ede grow up, is basically her father figure.
Yeah, he makes it to the Priory, so...
Yeah, so he passes out at some point, and a giant bird, I picture an ostrich,
I pictured so many things every time. I didn't know what I was supposed to view.
Yeah, in my head they're giant ostriches, but there's these really intelligent birds that can speak, and it basically picks him up and brings him to where it needs to go. And so he's done that piece, and then they're like, you can't leave the Priory because now you know it exists.
Proceeds to drug food.
Yeah, they're like, so either you stay forever or we kill you. Your choice. So he's working there, he's in the kitchens, things like that.
Slowly forgetting his old life.
Yes, because he's being drugged. And then, lots more happens with him. I actually enjoyed his storylines because every time we were, like you said, there wasn't as much of him as some of the other characters, and every time we saw him, something tragic was probably occurring.
The more we talk, the more I'm like, yeah, I guess they all had very tragic storylines.
Yeah, so basically, eventually, he gets back and he gets to see his sister and the queen, and then Ede is struck by a poison dart, and so now he has to go back out, and lots happening, lots of travel for him, and I just appreciated, I think, that he kept going even though he didn't really want to, and he didn't always know the right, he didn't know the customs, he didn't know the right thing to do or say, and he kind of had to feel his way through it, and I feel like that just in a lot of my life. I'm like, what am I doing now? Let's just try this.
I know we still have other characters to discuss, but just very briefly, I liked that this box, essentially a puzzle box. This started a part of the book that became like a pirate treasure hunt sort of thing, where they started figuring out like all these myths and legends they knew about were real, and they had to find the sword and the waxing and waning jewels, and there's this crazy connection with how the jewels are connected to their planet versus the universe, the cosmos, and they have to find at some point like this mysterious small island out in the east, and this also is where, even though it started this sort of treasure hunt, I started really feeling the very large coincidences of like Loth is the one that brings the box to the Priory. Loth has a sister whose father has the secret knowledge to where the sword has been hiding the entire time, and then Tane's line, her family line, has been secretly hiding one of the jewels the entire time. Like the main characters, of course, they chose the main characters to have the important aspects. It's a book, it's a story, but the way that they find those items when they do, after all of these years of not knowing where they are, and finding each other when they do, and putting it together when they do, it's just like a lot of coincidence, which didn't exactly knock it down a star or anything for me, because it's a fantasy novel. It has to come together anyways. Of course, it's going to happen in the book you're reading, and they couldn't find it for thousands of years beforehand. But the coincidences started to add up, which did bother me a little bit.
So, one thing I wanted to mention with Loth is he has a lot of interaction with the pirates.
Mm-hmm.
The various there's multiple pirate ships, and this was a great example of a couple small details that only he could put together, because of all these different interactions he's had. But he interacts with this pirate named Layla.
Is this the Golden Empress?
Well,
no, that's Roos. Roos meets
Roos.
the Golden Empress.
So he interacts with this pirate, the one that calls him a little lordling and teaches him things about pirate life, basically. And he's on her ship a couple times, and he gets dropped off at this foreign court at some point, and the king at that court, emperor, tells a story about the one love of his life, and basically says that he was advised, because she was so low born, that he couldn't marry her, and he basically is like, I never loved you, and makes her leave. But in the story, he calls her a sea maid, and I think, just based on the different interactions, that she is the pirate that Loth has been seeing over and over. And then also the captain of that ship that he's on is Captain Hathrow? It doesn't matter. The captain of that ship supposedly is Queen Sabran's real father. And I started realizing when they were saying the name in Ede's story, and then they're calling Captain whatever the same last name is, and I literally went back 2 chapters, and I was like, wait, is this the same? Is that the same? It's spelled the same. And toward the end, Loth asks him so there's rumors, and the captain was just like, who knows? Yeah, maybe, but what's it matter at this point? I'm a pirate, and so I liked those little, I don't even know if they could be called Easter eggs, but those little things that only that character would ever know.
It's just small, detailed world building. It's just, it's really cool. I like it. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of connections from the past. There's a lot of little secrets, not to us, because, we're the reader. There's lots of little secrets in the myths and legends and songs they tell. A lot of things come full circle. I felt like I was reading Lost, because the show Lost, everyone ends up being connected somehow. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, wow, when you really get into the details of this book, we'll get into the witch. Hold on, I have her name. It's Caliba. Is that how you said it? Caliba?
I don't know how I said it, but that was...
I said Caliba, I think. But
let's just call her the witch.
The witch? Okay, I'm good with that. The witch is... she can change her form. She can turn into a dragon. Whatever she needs to be, she can turn into it. That's one of her powers. She is immortal. She ate from the fruit on the island, which I'm sure has a name that I can't remember right now.
So, as mentioned earlier, there's 3 trees. The orange tree, which is where the Priory is. The hawthorn tree, which is where the witch ate.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually in the land that Loth will eventually rule. Goldenbright?
Goldenbright? I don't know, something like that.
And then the third one is a mulberry tree. And that is where Roose ends up at one point. And the mulberry tree has been chopped down.
The end point of this treasure hunt Roose and the Pirate Queen has been on is this island that was lost to legend.
Yeah.
And this is where the secret to immortal life is supposed to be. And actually is. However, what was not clear until later on in the story, when they learn more details about the myth, was, yes, if you eat the fruit from this tree, you are immortal. But only the first person who eats the very first fruit ever from the tree. After that, magic gone. Mm-hmm. So not only do they get there and the tree has been chopped down, but even if it hadn't been destroyed, it still would not have given the magic they were looking for.
Right. So do we have one more character?
We can go over Tane, who... the ceremony continues. She gets the Dragon Rider job that she always wanted. Then stuff goes down, and...
They found out that she was the person that Roose outs her and basically says, hey, that Dragon Rider with the fishhook scar on her face, she let the mysterious man onto the island and didn't report it. So they find out, they strip her of her title. Her dragon is kidnapped. They send her to basically
Feather Island,
basically like they have the trainees and they're like, you 10, you get to go be dragon riders. Everyone else gets to go on this secret island and read books for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So she's kind of exiled there. Her and her dragon are not siblings, but have like a mother-daughter relationship. And they're bonded in almost like a religious way.
Yeah, once you're assigned your dragon, there's basically a connection that occurs there. There's a bond that occurs there where you're basically just your family. You're one mind. You're one of the same.
So she decides her whole goal is to get back to her dragon, and she's very self-deprecating. She feels like she's not worthy because she grew up with nothing. She didn't know her family. She would get random pains in her side. She wasn't, she didn't feel strong enough or good enough. But I really liked her dragon. Mm-hmm. That was one of the characters that just was smart. And like when Tane's like, the world is ending, she's like, you're just human. Like,
this is going to be a weird connection, but this is what my mind always goes to. The dragon is our Dumbledore character, the calm, wise, like, this is the character that you're going to hang on every word because you want to know what it has to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the dragon is captured. The dragon is held. Roose steals a dragon scale from her. Every time, like, again, it was a slog for me to get through this, but something about the dragon made me cry. Like, oh, they found her. Like, suddenly I'm crying and, like, didn't even realize it. And then, like, lots of things happen. They take her to the Priory where they kill dragons, and the dragon is shot down, and the dragon's like, you go on without me. You have your mission. I'll find you. And at the very end, she's falling, and the dragon catches her. Tears. Like, it was just a good relationship, mm-hmm. and I actually really enjoyed her.
It was story. Smartly done because the dragon. I keep saying the dragon. I know that I know how I pronounce it in my head. I can't say it out loud. It's
like a 20-letter.
Yeah, name. But the dragon. We all know. The dragon is not like a major character. Like, when we get a scene with her, it feels special because it's very sporadic. This is And I think that's what makes it so cool is like, oh, it's dragon time. Like, what is she going to say? How is she going to help the situation? So it's a really special time anytime we get to see or hear from her.
Yeah.
How did you feel? Because I remember you were reading it at some point and you messaged me about the side pains.
Yeah, so she, like I mentioned, she's been having these side pains on and off.
Tane now, not the dragon.
Yeah. She has swelling on her side, like in her rib area. And she's never had it checked out because she's an orphan and it's, just a student. And
she was grown up told that it was a bone spur.
Yeah, so it's never really bothered her. Like, it bothers her, but not to the point where, like, she can't function.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's finally on Feather Island where the elder there takes an interest in her and actually, like, cares for her. Like, I think it's, like, the first relationship where it's not, like, you need to be better. It's like, hey, sit down. Let's chat type of thing. Very grandfatherly. And he's like, no, really, like, we should get that checked out. And so they have a doctor come over. The doctor is cutting open her side, like, hey, we should probably see what this actually is. And then there's earthquakes, I believe. And
yeah, there's earthquakes because the nameless one is close to waking up.
Yes, and so they all have to, like, run away so that they're safe. And the doctor runs in one direction, the old man runs in another, she runs in another, and then, like, suddenly, like, trips or turns or moves or something because of the jostling, and the stone falls out of her side. And so I get, like, she would never know it was there. She knew she had a scar there, but didn't know why. But it was just at the time that it happened. Now that I've finished it, I'm like, this is what her whole line has done forever. But in the moment, I'm like, how did you not know there's a big
jewel
in your side? Like, she's trained as, a warrior and can do all these very physical things. So she's got to be thin, at least in my mind, or like not a lot of body fat. How do you not realize that there's like a gemstone?
Yeah, it was unclear to the degree. The doctor didn't have to make a large incision. Like, it was
it wasn't like in her guts.
Yeah. It was far enough out that it was mistaken as a deformity in bone.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, so unimportant, I know, but I was wondering how it was sitting in her that it wasn't like shifting or moving or clearly something else other than a bone her entire life.
Magic, I guess it's magic. It's
I
magic
don't even think it's magic. I think it's just that's how I wrote this scene.
Yeah, so when it happened, I was like, what?
But it's an interesting choice. A cool choice, I should say, but an interesting choice how her family's line, like, it's not like there was some hidden chest passed down the line. They used their own bodies as each person was born as the safe place, which could either be genius or a threat to your entire life if somebody found out.
Well, and what happened to her parents was that she was a small child and saw a butterfly in her yard, and she walked away to follow this pretty butterfly, and she follows it, for a little while, and while she's away from the house catches fire and her parents die. So, like, they would have had the forethought to say, we're going to do this at 3 years old or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure it's borderline not far after birth.
Yeah, so they would have to take it out of her, whichever parent had it, and then place it into the next one.
Which also means she had it while being a small child. Obviously, she grew, and I guess the gym never shifted within that, or it grew with her. Like, it's hard to say how that works.
Again, I don't know.
But it works. It's, even if you don't like it or if it's unrealistic, it was a really cool idea or like storyline. I was like, oh, cool. They used their own selves as vessels to hide this jewel.
Yeah, no, I did like that. One thing, though, that I wanted to jump to about her and Sabran is that they are spitting images of the original holders of the stones. So Sabran, Tanae, we find out is, this descendant of the first woman that found the mulberry tree, and they look exactly the same. So much so that when the witch sees Tanae, she's like, oh, I knew you were alive somewhere. Like, hey, buddy. And Tanae's like, I don't know you. What the? Excuse me? And the witch, when she's not, shape-shifting.
She has a go-to look that she wears always, but it's false.
Well, but Ede hits her with worm fire, I think. One of the fires that she can wield, and it removes all enchantments.
Yeah.
And so you see her real form. And her real form is Sabran.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just so strange because we find out that the witch was the original queen, and she created this line of queens.
Well, I think they say every daughter born, because it's guaranteed to be a daughter for whatever reason, every daughter born looks like the previous daughter. Like, that's just how the line works. So the witch, being the only immortal person in the universe, had to come up with a fake everyday form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just really interesting that, like, again, it's a book. So, like, at the time, like, if we were just, a little bit shifted, Tanae wouldn't look like the original mulberry tree owner because it's not the same in her line.
So I want to know what you thought, because maybe in the moment when Ede uses the disenchantment spell and the witch turns into Sabran, my go-to thought, and I had to pause, I had to think for a few minutes, I was like, wait a second, is this actually our Sabran? Have we been tricked this entire book? Like, is this the queen and I'm finding out she's the bad guy? And then after the explanation, I was like, oh, okay, I see what's going on now. But I was so mind blown. I paused and I was like, no, Sabran was bad the whole time.
I didn't think that it was our Sabran that was bad. I thought that maybe somehow she had, like, transported Sabran or something, like, because she's an all-powerful witch, right? So it's like maybe she did something weird, and I had to read it, like, a couple times to understand that it wasn't Sabran, it was just her ancestor.
Yeah, at one point I was like, oh, she's disguising her real self and choosing the face of Sabran to mess with Ede. And then I was like, well, it's a disenchantment spell, so that can't be it. So it was a fun, like, little, gasp moment, a good little twist.
Our final person, which I feel like we've been going, but is Ede. And I think we've talked a lot about her already.
There's not much to say about her left, except I do want to touch on, how do you feel about her and the Priory as a thing?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the Priory is basically created to protect against the worms and the Nameless One, and the women of the Priory, all the warriors are women, and they give birth and they, fight off the worms if they show up, to include, like, wyverns and the water dragons, any dragons they're against. And they receive fruit from the orange tree, which gives them...
it's like their battery. They have to recharge their magic every so often.
Yeah, and she knows, like, when she's running low or when she needs more. And the orange tree will only give it to someone who's worthy. I really enjoyed the whole concept. She was trained from basically birth to... I think she was, like, a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
To be this warrior, so she could wield her magic, swords, daggers. She spoke multiple languages. She was kind of the, like, the cool one.
And the Priory itself is a classic example of, like, here is a society who wants to do good and protect and has good intentions, and one person gets too power hungry and becomes the leader, and now that leader needs to fall.
Yeah. What I think is interesting about the Priory is that you are basically a handmaiden, and then you have to do something great to become a red damsel, and then and that's, you're, like, the main warrior person, like, full-fledged. You're not an apprentice anymore. And so her assignment to do that is to go protect the queen. And so she's doing that for like 10 years. And I didn't realize when we started that she was almost 30 years old when the book begins. So at some point she says, like, you know, it was in relation to someone else, but she was like, oh, he's probably, you know, like 30 and I'm 28. I was like, how are you 28? Like, I thought you're younger than that. But she also calls other people in the, specifically a scullery maid, she calls her child a lot. Like, don't be silly, child.
Yeah.
Which made her seem old. But yeah, I think that they were unsure if the Sabran's line was keeping the Nameless One at bay. They actually had part of the true story, like formation story.
They had the first half of their world's origin story.
And then Sabran had a different version of it growing up.
Twist end. Everything else was the same.
Yes. And then Tanae's part of the world had another piece of the story. So it was very interesting, again, seeing it all come together and what the truth of everything was. And we learn a lot of that from the witch. And her kind of being bombastic. What's a good word for her? Like, she wants everyone to know how great she is.
Yeah. And
she does that classic bad character thing of like, I'm going to tell you everything before I kill you.
Yeah, I guess I should say I don't have many thoughts on the witch. She's a pretty relatively straightforward character. She's exactly what you expect. You know, she's kind of a one step ahead of the game. She's super evil, super powerful. Gets taken down pretty, I wouldn't say easily, but you know, her part to play ends pretty quick once we're at the end game of the story.
Well, and I think part of that is she, like you said, to maintain your magic, you need to eat regularly from the tree. And she was exiled for choices she made, supposedly for killing Ede's mother, but she didn't actually do it. And so she was exiled and hadn't eaten of the tree in like decades. And so I think overall she does get back to the tree and she does get, you know, different things. And she's trying to help the Nameless One because she wants power. But I just don't think after decades of being away from your power source, you're suddenly fully charged. So I think that's part of why she was pretty much a done deal.
I didn't think about that. That could be true. I don't know how quickly you're recharged once you eat from the fruit. It's a good thought. One thing that the Priory teaches their students, and Ede is especially good at, and this kind of broke my brain because I was like, oh my god, if other fantasy novels did this with magic, endgame. There's this thing that they can do called candling.
Yeah, I don't know what that was.
So, obviously...
Was it making people sleep?
No. So this is the coolest. They totally put like science into this book. So...
Oh, if it was science, I just blacked out.
I mean, I say science, but it's not like science. So, obviously fire needs oxygen to burn, right?
Yeah.
It takes oxygen. So, the Priory, their main magic is fire. They can put fire in their hands, whatever. So what she does is she lights a minuscule flame inside a person's body or their lung. Obviously, you need oxygen to breathe, but so does fire. So the fire takes up all your oxygen and you pass out from suffocation.
But you don't die.
You don't. I mean, you die if if the fire keeps going because you need oxygen to breathe. But when we learned about candling, and she's making these tiny little flames so small that they don't touch anything inside your lungs, like they don't touch the walls of your lungs or anything, any organ in the body. It just sits there to exist and burn all the oxygen your body's trying to use to stay alive. And then you pass out because there's no oxygen to breathe. I can't believe I've never read any other fantasy novel that used that idea. Like that could end so many storylines so much faster.
I didn't understand how it was working, but now that you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, that is what it is. But I just understood because she'd be like, oh, I can candle 2 people, I can't candle 50.
Because it's really hard to do. You have to make the tiniest of flames.
Yeah, you have to focus really intensely, and she only has a certain amount of power to use, and so I just remember understanding that they were passing out. and that they would be fine. Like, she at some point said, like, no, they'll wake up.
Yeah, she burned just enough oxygen inside their body, and then put the fire out so they wouldn't die.
Right.
It's so cool. I love that.
So we've hit on most of the or all the main characters and a lot of the side characters. I know we've probably talked quite a long time at this point. So I am interested to know how you felt with everything ending.
That was my next question for you, was basically like the nameless one.
Yeah.
The ending comes together coincidentally perfect. It's fine. It's the big final boss. The nameless one, the first time, 1,000 years ago, one of his scales gets unhinged. You know, it's like kind of loose or whatever, and so there's flesh protruding out, and that's where they need to hit it in order to mortally wound and kill him forever.
Yeah, someone says that basically in the previous battles, someone unlocked the door, and now we just have to walk through it.
Because in the previous battles, they didn't have the 3 keys, if you will.
Yeah.
So they need...
They didn't have the sword. They just had the 2 stones.
Right, yeah, because the sword, they needed the sword to... Stab him. Stick him. Like I said, it all happened fast. It all ended fast. I didn't like the genericness of, like, the nameless one. Like, so many books, the nameless one, he who must not be named, the dark one, if you're reading the Wheel of Time. It's all very just like this crazy evil from the dawn of time that just apparently always existed. And because I think the nameless one just one day years ago in legendary times broke out of the mountain and was free, and it's like, it's all very ambiguous. Like, how? Why? I guess he exists. He's just here, and he's the bad guy because we need a dark, ambiguous bad guy that is the personification of darkness. Like, so classic fantasy in that respect, but still pretty cool. Still very, like, it was exciting because this is where the whole world has to team up. They have to put their religious differences and ideals aside. The dark one comes from, or the nameless one comes from, the abyss, which is like this vast empty ocean, and all the ships from all around the world are meeting up here, and their people have to work together, and it starts to happen, and he rises out of his prison, and it all felt very epic. Like, I'm like, give me an HBO miniseries. I want to see this.
I agree. I really liked seeing, and maybe like I have this like little idealistic part in my brain, but I liked having all the rulers that we've kind of either, like, we knew the queen obviously intimately, but we didn't know the other rulers as well. We just kind of heard them existing, or like Loth spoke to that one emperor for a while.
Yeah, the late game entry was the ruler of the 12 lakes or whatever.
Yes.
I liked him.
Yeah. And so they all come together, their ships come together, there's, they're all ready. And they're like, we're meeting on the abyss right before this starts, and maybe we won't kill each other after. Like, it's, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yep.
And just for today, though. And then we go back and we'll see what happens.
The very end of the book implies that basically at the end scene, the people of the West who hate dragons have to deal with the fact that people of the East literally wield dragons as friends and weapons, and they have to work together with that. And I think they start to realize, yeah, these water dragons are on our side. Like,
yeah,
maybe we shouldn't be so. It's implied at the end of the book that, it's going to take years, but they're going to reunite once again with all the other continents.
Yes, and I just really liked that, and I thought it was really powerful imagery and how she explained some of it. And I liked that one theme with Sabran is the woman can dress. She shows up to everything, and they explain her outfits, and it's very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I realized it until she met the emperor or whatever of the 12 lakes, Great Lakes, whatever, and she was wearing pearls from his nation. And
oh yeah, I forgot about that.
That crown was from before, like, centuries old, like. And he's like, oh, we also have, lake pearls that are different than the ones you're wearing. And she's like, oh, I should see those sometime.
Yeah.
Like this, like, maybe we can do this.
Yeah, I like that a
know.
lot.
I liked it. I liked the end. I liked,
It was, like I said, short and sweet, but powerful.
It was. And I liked, seeing everyone come together. And I mentioned I liked that the dragon came back, the good dragon. But I liked that the good dragon gets Tanae and Eid both on her back to take out the nameless one. And they, like, I'm picturing, like, they have a stone in each hand and they're going like this, like, holding
They're grasping their left and right hands.
Yes.
And their empty hand is held up high with the stones.
Yes. And they're, like, getting all that power focused on the nameless one. And I liked their relationship specifically because they're both badass warriors, and trained to just be assassins.
And it's the first time they meet.
No.
Isn't it?
No. Well, they've met.
They meet right before the battle, but, like, they meet at the end of the book.
Yeah.
All they have left to do is, hey, we met each other. We are against each other because you hate dragons. I love them. But we have to train and then go do this thing in the abyss. Like,
yeah.
They only meet at the end.
They've only been together a couple weeks. And what I was going to say was I like that Tanae calls Eid the dragon slayer or dragon killer, and Eid calls Tanae, like, a dragon lover or rider or something. Like,
and it's, like, half friendly, half still kind of, button heads.
Like, they're, like, saying goodnight to each other, and they're like, goodnight, slayer.
Yep.
Like, I don't know. There was a mutual respect there and an understanding.
Because everyone's brought up in their own way, and you can't help that. So they're just kind of, they're playful with it, but they're also like, you'll come around.
Yeah. So obviously the nameless one is defeated, and then we kind of go into where our 4 people end up.
Yeah, they each get, like, one chapter dedicated after the battle to sort of see where we
Yeah, so Roose finally gets to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes to the grave of his love, and somehow, not magically, but the widow of his love is there and is like, you made him happy. Let's be friends.
Yeah.
And that was kind of his end. Loth goes back to where the Don Marta is, which was the person who helped him escape when he had red sickness. And his sister, actually, who we haven't really mentioned, her name's Meg, but she was working in, like, a field hospital there, trying to help the effort against.
Oh yeah, forgot
against
about
the
that.
dragons there, because there's dragons all over this world, and they're all rising with the nameless one and fighting, and so they kind of go there, and it's kind of like, we're gonna go and rule our home again. Tanae and her dragon go to the mulberry tree. So that island that that island that Dr. Roose went to with the pirate queen and found that it was chopped down. She goes to basically see where her ancestors were from. And she finds a statue of basically herself, but it's her ancestor. She bows down to pray. And then she falls asleep, I guess, but wakes up with a white butterfly in her hand and her side bleeding. And that's where we leave her.
Yeah, I wasn't like I think that was more reminiscent of, like, that's the butterfly that
saved her.
Yeah, or the kind of butterfly that she followed out before her house burned down, and her side bleeding was a reminder. And yeah.
So I just think that she probably, because she's been accepted back as a dragon rider, I think she'll probably help continue dragon relations going forward. And and then Eid and Sabran
have to take a 10-year like a 10-year break apart because of Priory reasons.
Well, they're going to have a long distance relationship, basically. So Eid is the one that slays the dragon. The very end, she's the killing blow, in a sense, for the nameless one. And so the Priory that wanted to kill her asks her to come back and be the new prioress, the new in charge.
Because the power-hungry one is now gone.
Right. And so she's like, this wasn't going to work you're the queen. And I'm just, what am I? I can't do this. I can't be your princess consort. I'm not a princess. And Sabran basically says, well, I'm going to abdicate in 10 years. And she's like, to who? And she's like, I don't know. We're going to figure it out because I can't have kids. So...
Yeah, we should mention her line is done. She's the last of her line.
Yeah, so she's like, we're going to explain the true history of the world and where our religion has been wrong, and we're going to change people's mind, and I'm going to abdicate, and then I'll basically come live with you. Mm-hmm. And we can... Eid promised to take her somewhere because Sabran, as we mentioned at that point, had not been anywhere outside of her palace.
I totally forget the name, but there's this place they always bring up, which is like this... like
Moon something. But yeah.
Just like this paradise for life where, like, if you can find it, it's just like a perfect place to...
Yeah. And so they promise each other that they'll go somewhere in 10 years. And you kind of hear, like, you know, I can come visit you, and we're going to have... Someone mentions, like, all the heads of state are going to go to this palace in the spring. And there's kind of Eid will be there, and so will Sabran. You know, like, they're going to have their little getaways and their little weekends, and they'll send...
It's the best men all over again.
Yeah. They'll send letters by various birds back and forth.
That take, only months to get to each other, but it's fine.
You know what? It's okay. Well, there's dragons now.
There are dragons now, yeah. Hopefully the dragons are a little more widespread.
Yeah.
All right. How many stars?
A solid 2.5.
Oh my god. I didn't think you were going to go that low.
So there was a point where I was not going to finish.
I remember that, yeah.
About 250 pages in or something, I was like, I normally read 4 books a week. Like, this has taken me over a month.
This is 4 books a week. This is your 4 books.
But it's taken me forever, and I couldn't read anything else.
Y'all, if you haven't seen this book in person yet, it's a Bible and then some. It is massive.
Yeah, you could knock someone out with this
book. It's a weapon.
And so like I said, I really liked, and I'm sure from this conversation, I liked all the components. Mm-hmm. But because it was so hard for me to read...
No, that matters, yeah.
It's just, there's something about it that didn't work for me, and didn't, like, I have books where, like, I literally can't put them down. Mm-hmm. And I want to read day in and day out, and as one ends, I want to start the other one immediately. This was not that for me.
So I actually read it really fast. I could not put it down. I did indeed go with a 5-star review.
Very nice. For
your rating, is this a book, knowing that it has good components, would you recommend it?
I don't know if I would. It would have to be to the right person.
It's a very specific... Yeah, you can't give this to just anybody.
No. I would watch it. If it was a show,
Look,
I would
like
watch
I said,
it.
HBO mini, give me like 8 episodes.
Yeah.
This would wreck.
It would be amazing.
Yeah.
I will say, too, that if there was another book in this world about Teenage Dragon or about the pirates, I would be interested in it.
Oh, yeah. You could do some spinoffs with this.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention this, but now that you say that, one of my biggest positives was that not only is this an epic fantasy, but it's a singular book.
It is. Which is why it's so big.
Which is why it's big. It's got everything in one. I mean, fantasies... you have Lord of the Rings, which is 3, books, or The Hobbit. Or you have The Wheel of Time, which is 15 books, which I've done. And I can tell you, as much as I love that series, that's effing hard to do.
For sure.
So to have an epic fantasy like this and know that you're done with it is a relief. So I love that about it. All right, so that sums up Priory of the Orange Tree. Next book, and I don't know anything about... I know this is a popular book, but I don't know what it's about, so this will be interesting. We're doing My Policeman by Bethan Roberts. Yeah. Do you know anything, or are you going in blind?
I heard about it on a YouTube video, on a BookTube video, and it had a really good review from a person that I've read other recommendations from her, and I was like,
And this is going to be general fiction, I believe. Simple, general...
Yeah, I think it has something to do with... I want to say maybe like the 50s or 60s era.
Okay.
And there's a gay relationship that's not, socially acceptable. So that's kind of all I know.
Okay. All right. Well, until next time, just a few things to keep in mind. We do a $1 Patreon, which gives you early access to episodes. And we have a Facebook and a YouTube at PaperQuest Podcast.
And Instagram at PaperQuest Podcast. And a email if you want to give us recommendations or suggestions at paperquestpod@gmail.com.
Until next time.
Bye.